book. It was challenging, the first one.
Because he wanted to be in the place of love.
Somebody came up with the idea.
And he was 100% accurate in his prediction.
Plenty of iodine or calcium. You don't have to know any of that stuff. All you have to be able to do is chew.
Today we're going to be talking about finding the Philosopher's Stone. And you know, this actually is a 3-hour presentation that I trimmed down to 45 minutes. And even so doing, I'm going to be racing through it. So I have a tremendous amount of information to convey. And, you know, when Alan asked me and Mark Becker asked me to come back, it's my pleasure. I was in England for the month of August. And as I said at the panel this morning on the Strange Universe, I have traveled and spoken around the world really for the last 17 years, 18 years, in about 3 countries and about 10 to 14 cities in the U.S. a year. The last 3 years I have been in the cave writing this new book. Many of you know I have a book out called Dialogues with the Angels. I only brought maybe 20 copies here. There will be some in the back when we're done, and there's some at Alan's booth, which is sort of, I think, in the room right across the way from the Gramercy room. But this new book that's going to be coming out in the spring is The Lost Years of Jesus and the Secret Schools of Initiation, where I have tracked him through those 30 missing years. And it's been quite a journey to do so. I never thought really in a million years that I would write a book on Jesus, but my family's fundamentalist Christian. I grew up in the Deep South, and I've been a clairvoyant since the time I was little. When I was growing up, I lived across from a large woods, and I could see the devas and the elemental spirits in the forest. And then when I was about 8 years old, these angels really began to appear and to, oh goodness gracious, that is just going to be such a challenge here. I don't actually I think I actually have to plug in the mouse to do this. Maybe it'll do it quickly. I did all of this actually yesterday. I spent an hour doing all the crazy updates, you know, thinking that would solve it. But in fact, technology sometimes is ahead of us. My process really has been that I have been fortunate enough to really work with angels and masters since I was young. When I was 19 years old, a group of masters called the Viragi Masters appeared to me. The Viragi, there's probably about 5 of them that still have bodies on the planet. Some of them are 350, one 500, one 5,000, and one 3,000 years old. And so from the time I was 19, really, these were my teachers really until I was in my probably early 30s. Like a lot of you, you know, growing up in the Deep South especially, I did a lot of praying that someone wiser than myself would arrive to help me connect the dots, because I was always doing a lot of interdimensional travel in the dream state. I found myself on board UFOs, being visited by some very beautiful high consciousness beings. All of this was not exactly quite normal in a traditional, you know, Deep South fundamentalist family. So when I was about 31, I met a group of beings called the Council of Nine. How many of you have heard of that group? Well, they're the 9 primordial waveform beings that create, maintain, and sustain everything. All of the universes that we see and all of the ones that we don't see. They were very, very, very big energies. And this was really before I began speaking. I spent probably the first 2 years with Rigel and Oriel, the eagle and the dove, and I will talk some more about them tomorrow and this coming week. But that's the Divine Father and the Divine Mother. The Divine Mother is definitely the energy of love. She is the explicate universe. We're literally in the body of the Divine Mother. And it is the Divine Father, the wings of the eagle, that is the spiral that turns the entire universe. So the movement of the electrons around the neutrons, the movement of the solar systems, the movement of the galaxies, those are really the wings of Rigel, the great eagle. And there are many, occasionally these beings actually incarnate into the worlds of form, and that's something I'll talk a little more about this coming week. But today we really want to focus on the Philosopher's Stone. Andy and some of our volunteers in the back have been kind enough to sort of, we have a flyer somewhere, because it's impossible for me in one little narrow slice of time to even begin to convey the depth and breadth of this information. Can I borrow your flyer just a second? Tomorrow, I'm really speaking about angels and extraterrestrials, and all of these are actually new presentations that have grown out of this last 3.5 years in a cave. And I already had mind-blowing presentations before we started. Tomorrow, as I said on the panel, I'm going to be showing literally images of 12-foot, 15-foot, and 36-foot tall human beings that have walked this planet that in archaeology we have now found the remains of. And these are skeletons that are completely intact. These are completely amazing. So we're really going to be talking about the history of the world tomorrow and how our lore or our legends of angels, have derived. Of course, angels exist. Spirit guides exist. But a lot of the legends that we have really are of beings that had physicality and that came from the stars. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. On Monday night, the focus is completely really about the Anunnaki, then the history of the Nibiruians and the Anunnaki starting from 435,000 years ago forward. As most of you who have heard me speak know, even though I am a very deep and profound mystic, I ground my information in science, archaeology, anthropology, biology. I don't want you to just take my word for it. I want to actually show you the evidence. You can make up your own minds what you believe. But, I have both sides of my brain going. And I think that we, mystical though we may be, we must also find ways to not just tell and spin stories so that people think we're crazy, wacky people in the New Age, that we actually have the information to ground and back up what we believe. And so I'm somebody who is a teacher who works with both sides of the brain. And even in the readings that I do, they're not just esoteric, who are you at the highest level. It's how do you apply this in your own life? How does this transform your life at a practical way that empowers you and makes your life work at a better level? As I said on the panel, I'm going to be here all week. And if you look at the flyer, I think Monday night's about the Anunnaki, and that's in the program guide. It's not listed where it is, but it's in Mark Becker's guide. Wednesday night is about 2012 and the cycles of human evolution. And let me just say, once again, these are like 150 slide, 200 slide image shows. So they're very deep, very detailed, and very grounded information. And then Friday night, because I am initiated in the Egyptian mysteries, the Native American twisted hair tradition, the Celtic tradition, and the goddess tradition, on Friday night we're really going to be looking at the astronomy and the astrology of the stargates that were actually laid out in the ancient temples of Egypt. So where did the king and queen's chamber point to? Where were those stargates? And what is the duat? And how do we find it? And how can we use it in this whole transition time of 2012? That's the focus of Friday night. Saturday is a workshop that has to do with the Tree of Life, Codes of Ascension, and the Blueprint of the Soul. That is an experiential one-day workshop. We may wind up doing, we'll see how everyone's doing, we may wind up doing a one presentation for that, but a lot of it's going to be experiential and transformational, where I'll talk about the 9 orders of angels, how we all begin in one of those 9 orders, who we actually are, and how come we're down here with amnesia, and how we can wake out of the dream. Does all this make sense to everybody? Okay, so I know I'm rushing and I feel like I'm kind of talking in New York double time, but let's begin with finding the Philosopher's Stone. How many of you have an idea what the Philosopher's Stone might be? How many of you have heard of the Philosopher's Stone? J.R. Rollins was very brilliant how she crafted the book. It was originally called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, but they changed it to the Sorcerer's Stone. So most people don't really know that. Okay, let's see how... Okay, I have to turn this around in order to be able to make the little mechanics work. So the Philosopher's Stone was something that has been sought through all of the ages of mankind, but particularly we hear about it in the last 2,000 years, when the suppression of the deeper levels of the mysteries had to go underground. And we wound up having alchemists and hermeticists. How many of you know where the word alchemy comes from? It comes from kemet. Kim was the ancient name for Egypt. Okay, So alchemical would be the transformation of the self through the secrets, really, of ancient Egypt. Now, this alchemical process is not just simply a mental process. It's a transformational one that really deals with the activation of the trifold flame of the human heart. This was what actually the great mystery schools spoke of. How many of you know anything about the mystery schools? How many of you know that there actually ever were mystery schools? This is one of the things really that traditional Christianity and the dualistic religions of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, a lot of that got lost in this last 2,000 years of the Dark Ages. And we're at a place where we're now remembering it, we're rediscovering it, and we're connecting the dots. And I'm somebody who is, as a time walker, a historian, a researcher, and a rememberer. So in these initiation temples, there were very powerful things that occurred. There were 3 levels of the mysteries, as we'll see in just a moment. But the Great Pyramid of Giza, of course, was actually created for this purpose. And there is actually a hidden city underneath the Great Pyramid that I know a great deal about. And I won't be talking about that tonight, but we may touch on it a little bit on Friday. These secrets were encoded in certain symbols. And these symbols are called hermetics. Hermetics comes from the name Hermes. Hermes was actually Thoth. Thoth was the alchemist of the gods, the messenger of the gods. He was a scientist, an astronomer, an astrologer, a mathematician. He invented the 26-letter alphabet that we use to speak English in all the Romance languages today. But the Greeks called him Mercury or Hermes, and so we get hermetically sealed, okay, we get hermetics, which is actually a symbol language, which is the language of the soul. And this is something that I teach. I teach a mystery school. I've been teaching it for about 3 years in Atlanta. And I actually, to become a priest or priestess, it's not just like something you say that you are. You actually really need to ground it with both the left and the right sides of the brain. So, this is something that if I start coming back to New York, I'll begin to teach some of these mysteries to you all. And this next week is a really powerful start in that. Now, the mystery schools throughout time, their chief objective was to teach the doctrine of one divinity or one creator God. Unlike how Christianity has made it sound like the pagan paths where all these crazy people, dancing around and sacrificing animals that had, all these multiple gods and who knew who they were. In truth, behind all the faces of the many divinities was really one divinity. And this was at the heart of what the mystery schools taught. They also taught that we are eternal beings and that even though we physically die, we live again and we live again, that we are in our spirit selves immortal souls. The question is, do we remember? Okay, and do we act upon that? They taught about the dignity of the human soul and to lead people to see the shadow of the deity or the reflection of the deity, you could say, in the splendor, beauty, magnificence of the universe. We are just going to be so challenged with this, I can just tell. It looks like we can't even process it. Okay, let's see if we can...
I'll do.
This is what happens when you get around wireless connections. Do you know how to cut that off? Thank you so much. Brilliant men. I just love that. I am all for men. I think men make our lives a lot easier in so many ways. They sometimes make our lives a little harder, but let me say, there's a lot more good there than anything else. 3 levels of initiations. The mysteries were taught on these 3 levels. And this was because as souls, we have a physical body, we have an emotional body, and we have a mental body. And we actually have to master all of these. So consequently, the first level of the mysteries was really dedicated to the awareness of the divine in nature. And it was dedicated to the feminine, which is what Christianity unfortunately left out of the equation. The second level was the discovery of the Divine Father and the Divine Son principle, and how the Divine Father manifests in the world of form in the male form as well. And he's going to be passing around a clipboard. If you all would like to sign your, do your email and your name, please do. Just make it clear and pass it on, please. So, in the ancient world, they knew that there was a connection between philosophy, science, and religion, and that you couldn't have religious beliefs that couldn't be backed up by some form of science. that you couldn't have science that didn't have some level of coherent philosophy in them, that you couldn't have a philosophy of craziness and superstition that wasn't balanced by some devotion to the divine principles and some expression in the world of nature or the world of science, whether it's physics, biology, chemistry, astronomy, astrology. All of these sciences actually reflect the order and perfection of the universe again and again, which of course is something finally our sciences are beginning to acknowledge and recognize. The higher mysteries taught that during the higher degrees of initiation, the gods themselves actually partook in the instruction of candidates, or at least were present for these, which in itself was a benediction. As the deities dwelt in the invisible worlds and came only in their spiritual bodies, it was impossible for the neophyte to cognize them without the stimulation of the clairvoyant center of consciousness. So they were dedicated to awakening the inner senses: clairaudience, clear hearing, clairvoyance, clear seeing, clairsentience, clear knowing or feeling, and claircognitive, clear knowing. And these are all senses that we all have that are dormant within most human beings. People in this room are aware of them, but many people walking the streets out there are completely oblivious to them. Many initiates in the ancient mysteries stated emphatically that they had, in fact, conversed with the immortals and beheld the gods. And I will tell you for myself, many, many years ago when Rigel first appeared to me and Oriel, I mean, my soul self completely recognized these divinities and thought, how could I have ever even forgotten them? You know, and yet my mortal self did not know what was happening. You know, same thing for Thoth. The first time I ever had Thoth appear in my bedroom, he appeared literally with a long beak and the ibis head in the zoomorphic form. I knew it was an Egyptian divinity. This is 20 years ago. I didn't even know who it was. I had to go look it up. And it was like, Thoth, what is Thoth doing here? And he gave me a golden key. And, you know, he would only come in very rarely, every few years, until about a year before I set up the mystery school. And he came in night after night in the dream state and said, it is now time to set up the mystery school. It is now time. It is now time. And, you know, I would never have done that if he had not really insisted. But Thoth is one of the four great Kumaras, the four sons of God. Kumara means son of God. They're spoken of in the Vedas. Jesus was one of those, Sananda. Thoth was Sananka. He was one of the four Kumaras. So his mission was to set up mystery schools all over the planet. So Thoth is really behind every true mystery school. And I'm not just talking about, and I don't mean this in any insulting way, you know, New Age bullshit schools. Okay, I don't mean to offend anybody who actually has a school that has depth and breadth and meaning, because there are wonderful people out there that are teaching at every level. I'm talking about like the real thing, you know, the thing that integrates the male and the female and the sciences with the spirituality, because there is a way for us to do it in a very grounded way. So I work with the eagle and the dove. And of course the eagle occasionally manifests down here. He manifested as Horus in his Sanandana form, who was the bringer of light and truth. This symbol of the great eagle was known actually with all of the mystics, and you see it with the Freemasons. You see it with if you go back far enough, you'll literally see it in every single one of the ancient paths, because they knew this. This age that we're moving into now, the age of Aquarius, has actually been called the age of Horus, because it is an age where we remember our own divinity, and I believe that the spirit of the Horus energy, which is one, again, of the four great Kumaras, Thoth, Jesus, Horus, those are three of the four, will return to the planet. Here we see, this is a Greek depiction of Zeus. And of course, what does Zeus use? He used the eagle as his highest animal totem. And here we have, again, another Hermetic symbol. We see Indri, which was put above Jesus' cross, underneath the two-headed eagle here, king of the universe. And here we are again. I also work with the dove energy. And who is the dove? She is really the divine mother. She's the creatress from which everything comes, everything in the manifest world that we see. You know, we're like a fish in water that are so much in water that we're sitting around talking about whether there is any water. I don't know. Is God? Do you think God exists? I don't know. Where is God? I can't figure it out. You know, the divine is everywhere. We're literally in the divine, and we just have forgotten. She also, of course, has been known through all of the great mystery schools as Isis, the Divine Mother. And, you know, in the initiate's path, it has to do with, will you pull back the veils of Isis? And what is behind that layer? What is behind the third dimension? What is behind the fourth dimension? What is behind the fifth dimension? What is behind the expression of the explicate order into the deeper meaning of the implicate order? And this has been the quest, really, of many, many of the great heroes that we have the tales about, is the search for this connection and this divinity, which brings us back to our opening question about the Philosopher's Stone. What is the Philosopher's Stone? Well, many have sought it throughout the ages. This has been the quest of all of the great masters and all of the great sages. The Egyptian initiates, first and foremost, and for me, because I am initiated in these traditions at a very high level, this is one of the well springs from which the ancient teachings come. Certainly within the Greek tradition, we know that Plato, Aristotle, and Pythagoras were very high-level teachers. Pythagoras studied for 22 years in ancient Egypt. Plato studied, I think, for 12 years. So these are beings that in our traditional Western culture, we think of our culture deriving from Greece, but in actuality, the greatest wisdom teachers of Greece came out of Egypt, their study in Egypt. The founding fathers, who many of whom were Rosicrucians or Freemasons, they also were people who were very much on a quest for wholeness and humanity and truth. And the whole foundation of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the founding of this country, was literally set upon these spiritual principles, which unfortunately have been going through an erosion process in the last 8 years. These are some of the many incredible people who have sought these mysteries. And if you look at this list, it's like who's who. Sir Francis Bacon, Nostradamus, Dante, Copernicus, Shakespeare, Da Vinci, see we ran out of room here, Botticelli, Johannes Kepler, Sir Isaac Newton, William Blake, Thomas More, Victor Hugo, John Milton, Roger Bacon, Cosimo de' Medici, who actually brought us the Hermetica. He was really the head of the Medici family in Florence, amazing person, John Milton, and Daniel Defoe. And this is just to name a few. Of course, most people think of people like Aleister Crowley when you think of alchemy and Hermeticism. And Crowley definitely, kind of walked between the light and the dark side of the force. But he was kind of more infamous than he was, famous. There have been many, noted philosophers, scientists that have pursued this. So what was it that they were seeking? Can anybody give me an idea? Any guesses? Okay, well, yes, can you say?
The Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail. And what is the Holy Grail? Anybody? Transformation. That's really good. Who else? Someone said something about Jesus back there? Yes, the Sangreal, the blood of Christ. That was definitely part of that whole quest. Anybody else? Pardon? The Magdalena. Yes, this is definitely all part of the Grail wisdom. And, of course, the whole conversation about Jesus and Mary is a conversation for a whole nother workshop, a whole nother lecture. But we're going to actually look at what it is. Where's my magician? My computer magician. There are many kinds of magicians. This is a computer magician. You have to show me what you're... Thank you so much. You have to show that to me again. He went so quickly, It's like sleight of hand, Okay, so part of what they knew that many of us have forgotten is that we are, in fact, immortal spirits. We are angelic beings having a mortal experience. And so a lot of times we become so bogged down in the density down here that we completely forget that we are composed of air, earth, fire, water, and spirit. And of course the pentagram, unfortunately, because of Christianity, became a symbol of witchcraft, which is really not what the story is at all. In fact, the pentagram is the one sacred geometric shape that you can project around your field that if someone's trying to remote view you, they can't get in. This is why America, the largest industrial complex in the world, created their largest defense building as a pentagon, okay, so that they could not be remote viewed. And so, of course, if they told us it was horrible and terrible and, you know, evil and dreadful, and we'd go to hell if we used it, then, of course, we're not going to want to have anything to do with it. Just like the number 13, there are 13 lunar cycles in every single year, okay, the Divine Mother energy, 13. So 13 is actually a highly, very holy number, and, of course, once again, it was discounted. So Leonardo da Vinci, of course, encoded this in his famous drawing, which not only deals with the power of 5, but also the power of 9. If you count all of the appendages, there's a lot that's encoded in Hermetic wisdom in this one drawing. They believed that we as souls are on a journey. We're on a journey of discovery. And this journey can be expressed a number of ways. One of the ways that they believed it could be expressed is through our incarnating in the 12 signs of the zodiac. That in itself was an initiate's journey. And so they treated our incarnations in each one of these signs as a step on the path to complete mastery. This is why the people in the East call it the Wheel of 84, the Great Wheel of 84, because they're speaking about how many times we have to go around this wheel. You know, divide 84 by 12. You'll sort of start seeing what they're really talking about. So it's really 8 times around the wheel. The truth is you can go 80 times around the wheel. If you don't get your lessons, we can keep going around the wheel virtually forever. Now, another way that they conceived of this is as the Tree of Life. How many of you know about the Tree of Life? The Tree of Life has counterparts in Egypt, Sumeria, the Far East, the Near East, the Mesoamericans, the Celtic, the Norse, every culture of the world speaks of this. And we'll be speaking about this on Saturday, and we'll really be talking about what it really means, okay, at the spiritual level and at the interpersonal and the archetypal level. But they believe that as we travel this path, we actually wind up engaging with these divinities. Each one of these are sephiroths or spheres. And there's only if you can begin to learn, experience, and move into a relationship with these divinities. And by the way, the Christ energy is normally, well, they've got it as if it's here, but actually it's normally here in the wheel. And this is Da'ath. Da'ath is many times not even depicted on the Great Wheel of Life. It is the secret of the secrets. It's the innermost hidden mysteries. It is the place where you pass into the realm of death and you move into the Duat, the great beyond, where the great secrets reside. And we'll be speaking about that when we talk about the Stargates on Friday night. So they looked at astrology and the Tree of Life as literally a path to ascension or a path to awakening. So let's talk about what each of these are, and we're going to go to them pretty quickly, but I'd like each time if we can see how many Aries there are in the room. Would Aries raise their hand? Good. You bold and courageous rams. Aries are pioneers. You know, they're courageous. Many times they leap before they look, okay? But they're dynamic, they're charismatic, and they're natural leaders. But in the astrological initiate's path, they correspond to someone that's a child between the age of about 5 and 12, okay? In other words, you know how children are, like, oh, what is it? I want to eat it. How is this? I want to touch it. I want to engage. They're very interactive with life. Thank you for letting me bite on your pen. So in the initiate's wheel, many times it was looked at like the Aries was a young soul, a bold soul, a courageous soul, but not necessarily a very wise soul. Having said that, once we go all the way around the wheel, you'll see that there can be wise Aries because they could have gone around the wheel many times and come back to the place that they incarnate again as an Aries, this time with far greater wisdom. This is, of course, initiating fire, which is interesting. It starts in the spring when new life happens for us. It also, fire is one of the, after water, they say that fire arose from the water, but Ra arose from the cosmic waters of Nun. So here we have initiating fire. Then we move to Taurus. How many Tauruses do we have in the audience? I love those little Tauruses, you know. They're faithful, they're They're great friends. You know, they nest really well. They usually have lovely gardens and homes. You know, they help you out. You know, they're not trying to show off. They're just steadfast and true blue. But the challenge for Taurus, which, by the way, the equivalent within the initiate's path is the teenager that says the birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees and the moon up above and a thing called love. Let's make love. Let's have bubble baths. Let's have satin sheets, you know. Let's feel the sensuality of our bodies and be present in the physical world. But the challenge, of course, for the Taurus is that they can get stuck in matter. They can become stubborn. Every single path has its challenges, its good points, and its bad points. So the challenge for the Taurus is to not get too stuck. Then you have Gemini, and this is like a 19 to 21-year-old that says, do I go this way on the path, or do I go this way? How many Geminis do we have? Great, okay. So this is going into the world of experience, not necessarily knowing which path to take. And then we come to Cancer, where those experiences are internalized. How many Cancers do we have? Those sweet little Cancers. This is where you're processing and you're feeling your feelings. What did I learn? How can I digest and create that pearl of wisdom from all of my many experiences? And once you feel like you have it, you incarnate as a Leo and you say, I'm now wise enough to lead. How many Leos do we have? I am wise enough to lead. I will be the good queen or the good king. But then, of course, sometimes things happen and maybe your village gets wiped out, and afterwards you say, gee, that was a lot of responsibility. I think I'm going to go back in and I'll be the priestess, Virgo, or the priest. I'm going to go in and reconnect at a deeper level with my source. But this, of course, can be a lonely path. So the soul then says, wait a minute, that was all well and good, but I think I want a relationship. How many Libras do we have? And I didn't see Virgos. How many Virgos do we have? Okay, good. So Libra is all about, you know, I'll see your way if you'll see my way. Let's connect. Let's be friends. Let's be buddies. Let's be in a relationship. But, of course, they're the classic Renaissance person. So the challenge for the Libra is gaining enough power in any one area because they're such great generalists. Okay? So then the soul becomes a Scorpio. How many Scorpios? Scorpios say, I'm going to go as deep as it takes. I'm going to master my power, you know, I'm going to learn how to use my power wisely and well. And in truth, the entire initiate's path is contained within Scorpio. You have the Scorpion that misuses the power, the snake, which is where most Scorpios are, that are trying to use the power wisely, but they don't want to misuse it. So the question is, will they shed their skin and grow to the next level? The eagle that gets above the whole situation and actually learns that true power is connection with the divine instead of empowerment, instead of power over others. It is empowerment. And then the phoenix that becomes the Christ and the light of the world. So the whole path is contained within Scorpio. And then after, because it's fixed water, after the soul says, okay, I've worked hard, I've handled the power thing, I just want to break, I'll become a Sagittarius. How many Sagittariuses do we have? They say, you know, truth is my highest virtue. I'm going to put the backpack on my back. I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to see the different cultures. I'm going to embrace it all. And, you know, freedom and truth is my highest virtue. And so then the soul says, well, okay, I did that, and I really, you know, I feel good, but what do I want to contribute? And then they become a Capricorn. How many Capricorns do we have? I'm a little Cappy. So the Capricorns, they have their little tail in the world of water, the world of spirit. And they have their forelegs usually in the world of matter. So it's manifestation in the world of matter, but the question is, can you remember that the reason you come to manifest is to bring spirit down with you, rather than just getting stuck in goal achievement and thinking that the physical achievement in the physical world is all there is. So if the soul, you know, then the soul gets to a point of saying, you know what, the real thing is about truth. And then they become Aquarians. How many Aquarians? These are the humanitarians. These are the ones that are trying to bring the knowledge through many times. And they are visionaries and they're futurists. But of course, as anyone, they can start thinking maybe it's all about them, that they're so special, in which case they manifest as a, oh. Can you do it? Okay. Thank you. In which case they manifest as a Pisces. And the Pisces, how many Pisces do we have? The Pisces is the one that realized that you are me and I am you, and in the big scheme of things, we're all expressions of the divine. And if I'm unfair to you, I'm really unfair to myself. If I dishonor you, I really dishonor myself. So they're the ones who realize that we're all swimming in this great cosmic sea, and it would be well for us to honor one another. So this is the initiate's path, and this is, of course, ultimately, it is our alignment with that great central sun, both within us and outside of us, that the initiates begin to seek. Now, the journey to that sun is one that has many perils and many pitfalls, and I'm going to be talking about that all during this week, particularly on Wednesday night and on Friday night. And I've tried to make those very inexpensive. Those are only like $20 to come to those things, because I would rather that you tell your friends and that more people come. You know, yes, we all have to make enough money to pay our bills and to survive, but at the end of the day, my purpose in being out is the enlightenment and the awakening of humanity. And the more of us that have that information, the better. So you might wonder why, in fact, with this very interesting depiction, we have a serpent behind the 12 signs of the zodiac. And while I see that we have the 5-minute warning sign, so I'm only going to be able to rush through these last things very quickly, I will tell you that it has to do with the mysteries of Alpha Draconis, which is what we're going to be talking about Wednesday night and on Friday night. Alpha Draconis has to do with the precession of the equinox and the movement and the alignment of certain fixed stars as we move through our evolution as a solar system. We are now aligned with the pole star of Polaris, okay? And we will move off of Polaris, and we're going this way, about 160 years. 12,000 years ago and 12,000 years from now, we will be aligned with Vega. And Vega is a direct route into the great central sun. And this is, of course, Draco, the dragon, which the ancient Egyptians knew as Apophis. Passing Apophis in the Duat, and we're going to be talking about that on Wednesday and Friday, and we'll also be talking about the alignments of the king and the queen shaft in these chambers going to two very special areas of the sky that are gigantic stargates. These movements have been described in the rising and the falling of these ascending and descending ages through the work of John Major Jenkins, who discovered that as the Big Dipper moves, it creates, in essence, a swastika. Now, this swastika, before Hitler took it and flipped it and made it all confusing and negative in its connotation, was actually a very sacred sign. And it was a sign that was called the Chi-Rho. And it was a sign that was held by Osiris, who was an incarnation, an earlier incarnation of Jesus, or Sananda. And he was the Lord of Light in his age. And this is, again, all stuff that I'll be talking about this coming week. And you can see the papacy actually took this symbol. You can actually see the little flail here. Here's the Chi-Rho. They understood initially what all these symbols meant before they were all hidden from us. Here are the keys to the kingdom and the beehive. These are all hermetic symbols that the popes use on their crest. If you go back and look at hundreds and hundreds of years of the popes, they use the symbol of the Chi-Rho, which has to do with mastery of space and time. Here we have the crook, okay, the shepherd's crook, again from the papacy, taken right out of the Egyptian. And this relates to the planet of the crossing. Nibiru is something I'm going to be talking about at great length on Monday. I'll touch into it a little bit tomorrow with some of the Anunnaki, the images, the photographs of the 12 and 15-foot tall Anunnakis and the 36-foot tall Titans that I'll be showing in the workshop tomorrow. And this procession of the ages literally describes the evolution of consciousness on our planet. So if you had incarnated 1,000 years ago, which you may have reincarnationally, the energies that would have formed you up would have been quite different. If you incarnated 5,000 years ago, the energies would have been quite different. Because in every age, we are affected by this ascending and descending wheel. And these, again, are things we'll be talking about on Wednesday and Friday. The way through to the center has to do with the Great Eagle and with the constellation of Lyra. And this constellation in Vega is known as the Eye of God. It's the doorway through. The master alchemist ultimately discovered this, those who knew, And they were involved in the alchemy of transmutation, the light and the dark, the male and the female, the eagle and the lion. This is an alchemical journey, a very quick alchemical journey of describing that process. And here we have the alchemist who is, let the genie out of the bottle, or let us say the immortal spirit that transcends the physical body. Here we are as brave men who've conquered the world in the outer form, and women of beauty who value vanity and clothes. But actually, there's a part of the spirit that is in the fire here of transformation with that. We have our inner life that many people never see inside the mountain. And we have the fruits of our labors, both light and dark. The fruit, as Jesus said, you shall be known by the fruits of your labors. And along the way, if we pay attention, our soul self begins to awaken. And that soul self, see the star, encounters the ego and realizes that the ego is caught in the muck and mire of life. Most of us sort of live like this. Part of us is really aligned with our higher self, and part is not. This part is hurt or angry or jealous or vain or attached or judgmental, and this part is very conscious. But ultimately, we have an opportunity to slay our egos. And if we do so, our soul self begins a whole new process of a new life that is overseen by, in this case, the dove or the Holy Spirit. In our alchemical process, that young, brand newly born spirit often fights with its more reptilian nature. And here we have a three-way fight between the darker nature, the lighter nature, and the intervening personality that's trying to marry the two. And finally, we sort of have this awkward, joining of these three energies. Eventually, if we pursue this goal of transformation, we harness the physical energy so that all aspects of us are going in the same direction, and we transform into the peacock that has, of course, the eye of Horus within it. And we become the perfected woman and the illuminated or the enlightened man. And a new day dawns in our life. And on one hand, it's a brand new day. It's like we're a newbie. We're a young person. And on the outer world, people continue to chop wood and carry water. We pay mortgages. We do all the things we did on the outer. But in truth, we are in a completely different phase of our evolution and our growth. So this sacred marriage was essential to what the ancients knew. It's a marriage that in order to find the Philosopher's Stone, we must find within ourselves. It's part of our essential balance. There's Isis and Horus, male and female, and the heart in balance with truth. The alignment and the awakening of the Merkaba field, the discovery of the Philosopher's Stone, and ultimately the discovery of the pearl of great price. And I've gotten the stop sign now twice, so I know this was like literally enlightenment, in 30 minutes or less. I thank you all so much for coming. I hope that you'll come tomorrow, and I'll hope to see you later in the week. If you're interested in readings, I have a few slots left if you want to see Andy in the back or get a flyer. Thank you.